Hi, everybody. Mitch Tannenbaum here. Thanks for joining me for this week's security news update. Let's see what we got cooking here. This one's interesting. So, Ring, which is owned by Amazon, released what I would call a privacy nightmare. Ring owners now have the ability to capture facial images on their Ring cameras and save them in their familiar faces. Only problem is this likely violates state biometric laws in a lot of states, and you have no way to, as someone who happened to come in contact with somebody's Ring doorbell, you have no way to delete your image from their Ring account or tell them thanks but no thanks, but I would like you to comply with state law. I am sure that this will generate a class action lawsuit relatively soon, and Ring, their solution to how they think, which won't work, they're going to avoid liability is, Ring owners should ensure that they're following local laws. I don't think that meets the legal requirement, but, whatever. Question, does your security team have the authority to take instant actions? We've seen in many cases where the delay in taking action has caused a lot of damage, and that the delay comes from the fact that they have to get approval to do various things. You should have a playbook. The playbook should already be approved, and the playbook should say, if this situation happens, then here's what we're going to go do, and then they can just go do it. Because in the day of AI, when things happen in seconds, you can't be waiting an hour or two to get approval from somebody to do something. So if you need help in building those playbooks, let us know. India sent a secret message to phone makers like Samsung and people like that, and carriers like Verizon, saying that you must force install a particular snooping app that we have created on everybody's phone, and you must pre-install it on new phones before you deliver it to them. And it must not be disableable, and it must not be deletable. Of course, when you try to do secrets like that, secrets come out. It's just the way it is. And then they were doing some kind of song and dance, soft shoe tap. I don't know what it was, but it was pretty hilarious until they finally said, we were just kidding. However, if that memo had not come out, then I'm sure that they would not have changed their tune. They claim, and there's probably some legitimacy to this, that it helps locate lost phones. Probably does, but it seems like, first of all, there's plenty of other apps that do that, and not one that's run by the state. Second, unclear what else they're doing. And third, should be up to the user, and it certainly shouldn't be opaque to the user. SAML, which is kind of the backbone of things like single sign-on, been around forever. It's an antique in the computer world. We just saw a presentation in Black Hat Europe that demonstrates how to achieve full authentication bypass, and particularly in PHP and Ruby environments, which is a big chunk of the world. And the attacks open the door for attribute pollution, namespace confusion, and a whole new class of attacks. So unclear, what people are going to do about it. I think it means that, we're going to need SAML 2 or something like that, next generation, because it sounds like it's fatally broken. In the 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, there's a requirement for DoD to implement comprehensive AI and machine learning security frameworks that draw on existing NIST, typically, documentation, and which can be implemented as an extension to the existing CMMC frameworks. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Florida, and this is interesting, DeSantis used to be one of the president's allies, apparently not so much anymore. As the president tries to go off and give his AI buddies free reign to do whatever they want, the states are saying, no, I don't think so. And Florida just introduced a new AI Bill of Rights, which to me seems like it's DeSantis poking his finger in the eye of the tiger. With the AI executive order, the the Justice Department has been weaponized to go after states doing things that he doesn't like. Doesn't seem to be bothering DeSantis, so that's kind of interesting. OWASP has released a practical cheat sheet to securely using third-party MCP servers in AI. For those of you who are not familiar with MCP, Model Context Protocol, it's a way of getting the AI virtual world to talk to other systems and control them. Potentially high-risk operation. So you definitely want to do it right. And OWASP does some other stuff as well. So they're definitely getting around this AI stuff and trying to, help people do things securely. And speaking of AI, Microsoft Copilot has implemented no-code AI agents. It's kind of a graphical user interface to drag and drop to build your own agent. Of course, that agent might not have any security. Why would that be a problem? And, apparently that's not a big surprise. Tenable, one of the big security providers, says, they just released a report showing how insecure these agents are. So, interesting problem. And lastly, in the AI world, how hard is it to poison an AI large language model? Well, we used to think it was hard. It took a lot of work, a lot of skill, and a lot of compute resources. Turns out, according to researchers, doesn't require any of that. You can do that with a very modest amount of skill and virtually no resources. This is research done by Anthropic, which makes the Claude AI tools, the UK AI Security Institute, and the Alan Turing Institute. So reputable folks, and certainly, Anthropic would have no motivation to make this sound worse than it is. So that's kind of interesting. In the CMMC front, I'm going to point to one item as I do each week. Is paper CUI in scope for CMMC? At least according to the Army Corps of Engineers. And we don't know if this is going to stick, so I don't think I'd make a lot of bets on this. If it's only paper, never touches a computer in any way, shape, or form, the derivative products never touch a computer in any way, shape, or form, it's out of scope because their definition, this is the Army Corps, of information system is an automated information system, not an information system. We'll see what the Pentagon says about this. Hopefully they'll clarify it one way or the other, but it'd be certainly good to know which way that's going to work. As I said a minute ago, the president did sign the executive order unleashing the Justice Department to go after states who have laws that he doesn't like. The only people who are going to win here are going to be the lawyers. They're going to make a mint, and it's just the way it is. He wanted to abolish state AI laws. He's tried multiple times to get Congress to pass bills to abolish state AI laws. Congress seems not inclined to go do that. So it's going to be interesting to see. He's definitely going to weaponize the Justice Department to go after states that he doesn't like, but he's got states of, the very political beliefs, ranging from California to Florida, which are pretty opposite end of the spectrum, both of which have state-based AI protection laws. So we'll see. Texas does as well. And in terms of the education department, as I was saying about this executive order, there's a piece in the newsletter from an organization, NextGov, that's talking about, the two sides of it, and nothing's ever simple. Could we have a great national law? Sure. Is it likely that we can have a great national law? Not too likely, I don't think, but certainly, there's two sides to that coin. In the breaches department, quickly, Petco is really not saying a whole lot other than they weren't hacked. They did this to themselves. So this is a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And then they made data public that wasn't supposed to be data. That wasn't supposed to be public, rather. So we'll see where that goes, but not great when you have self-inflicted wounds. Iberia Airlines is the newest airline that was hacked by the Everest gang. They're asking for $6 million in ransom. They claim to have stolen 600 gigabytes of network data. But the airline saying the data stolen was limited to names, addresses, emails, and frequent flyer numbers, But the gang says, hey, we're still inside the networks. I don't know what they're talking about. This one, still developing. ASUS, the big computer maker, confirms a supplier. Again, this is third-party breach again. This is also the Everest gang. And they have not named the supplier that was impacted, but that will come out. But these guys stole source code, development tools, and technical documentation. So, ASUS says, well, it wasn't our network and doesn't affect the security of your computer. We'll see whether that winds up being the truth. A lot of times these things wind up being a lot worse than what they originally say. Researchers have found a 4.3 billion record database that doesn't have a password on it. The owner is unknown. One collection in the database contains 732 million records with PII and photos. The data this is unusual. The data is well organized and it's what's called enriched. Enriched means that you've taken data from multiple sources, combined them together into one set. So now you know about Mitch from this data source and this data source and this other data source all in one place. So very powerful, and we'll see who that winds up being. 700 Credit, which is a service for car dealers, leaked at least, they didn't leak it, they had bad security, 5.6 million people, names, addresses, birth dates, socials, and other stuff. They run credit reports and credit checks and identity verification for auto dealers. The interesting thing here is they're trying to be transparent, which I guess is good, but is really going to bite them in the tushy when the lawsuits happen. Apparently, when you pull a credit report, it makes sense. That pull is associated with a particular auto dealer. Only problem was they were not validating when someone said, go give me this data a second time. It was the same company that was requesting it. So when the hacker compromised a user ID, they could pull everybody's report that any dealer anywhere had ever requested. So not a good thing. And the other thing is that the API didn't have any what's called rate limiting, which means that the hackers could run these queries as fast as they possibly could, as fast as the little computer would let them do it, and there was nothing to shut them down. Those are kind of basic security principles, so not clear what's going to happen in terms of when the lawsuits happen. It seems like Congress and the White House are on different trajectories with regard to AI. Both of them want us to be successful, and I think we will be. The White House seems to think it's either or, us or China. I don't think that's the case. I think it's going to be an us and China. And I also think that, unless someone has a massive breakthrough that they can somehow figure out how to keep secret, which I don't think is possible, these things are going to seesaw back and forth. Congress seems to be at least a little bit more inclined to worry about protecting their constituents because they know that they might not get reelected. Old school voice phishing still works. 5 out of 8 Ivy League colleges were hacked in the last 6 months. And how they were hacked was not some fancy, schmancy AI-based tool. It was picking up the phone, calling the right person, and pretending you were somebody else. And, traditional social engineering phishing attack. And it was very, very successful. If firewall companies can't secure themselves, then what can we do? We've seen firewall makers like Cisco, Fortinet, and Checkpoint all have security issues. And that's because firewalls are software and software has bugs in it. And I have recommendations on what you can do in that article. Fundamentally, is you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You've got to assume you've got layered security, and there's lots of ways to do that. Maybe banks are tired of giving North Korea your money and giving it back to you. One bank that I have a relationship with sent me a note that they are getting rid of so-called secret questions, like what was your mother's maiden name? Because nobody would ever know what that was. And they suggested using PASQIS, which I have become a fan of. There's a bug in the jury system software used by a number of states that can leak sensitive information. The bug is trivial to go exploit. It apparently has been. Big Brother is watching, at least in New York City. They've built this massive database which aggregates data from all kinds of different sources, and every cop on the street can access that data from their cell phone. So that's a bit scary. CISA is continuing to warn, I guess I should say, but it's new warning about Russia financed attacks on water, energy, and food sectors. And I think that's an ongoing battle because, other than the really big players in those sectors, the rest of them have sort of marginal security, I would say. And lastly, the state of Washington utilities are turning to their lawmakers to help them deal with copper wire theft, because apparently it is surging out of control, and they don't have a good answer. The controls and penalties for selling stolen copper wire are problematic, and the hackers aren't so smart. They see this thing up there on a pole, they say, well, let's just cut it down. Well, first of all, if it's a power wire, you run the risk of electrocuting yourself. And if it's fiber optic, well, there's zero value to resale of that. So you just went through a lot of effort for nothing, other than causing an outage and causing the utilities to spend a lot of money. So we'll see what the state of Washington does. So with that, that's all we have for this week. Thanks for listening. So have a great Christmas holiday, and thanks for listening as always.